All right, everyone, we should be live. Let's make sure that's actually the case. Might be a little bit lower energy than sometimes because I just had to go out and do the driving lesson nonsense. I already know how to drive. Yes, some people claiming otherwise, oddly. Drove a long time in the US, but if you want to get a driver's license in a foreign country, you typically still have to pass some tests. I already passed the theory exam, but, there's more roundabouts in this country than there are in the United States. I see we're live on Rumble, so I don't even have to check. That's good. People pouring in. All my thom says, yo, yo, yo. JS Foogie says, greetings, everybody. Bana Layman, good morning. And Clank and David's Dog Spa, good morning from Kansas. We'll be talking about a lot of shit. The Vermont flooding has been added to the docket, by the way. There was an interesting story that compares 2016 to 2024 and to 2020 and compares all three and derives the conclusion that the current election is a bit more like 2016, actually, than 2020. But I bounced that because, half of Vermont has been flooded out right now, including part of New York and upstate New York, parts of New Hampshire. The damage most severe and concentrated, actually not far from Rutland, around the Ludlow area, up through the center of the county and into the county to the north of that, into Montpelier, actually. Yes, we'll be talking about Ben & Jerry's as well. We're talking about Gal Luft. That's the most important one. Also, I think that Threads by Meta is being astroturfed. The legacy media seems to be at the spearhead of attempting to make it cool. We'll see how that pans out for them. Once half the users are banned for saying naughty things and people realize that tens of millions of those accounts are probably inflation bots that Zuckerberg himself made, it's real cool. You can team up with all the latest Instagram influencers, as though that is an old hat at this point. Really, really funny. We're talking also about the Sweden's NATO bid. There has been a change in rhetoric by Turkey, actually, on the subject. And part of it dovetails in with their EU bid. There appears to be a little bit of mixed messaging here. So we'll be talking about all of this and much, much more. By the way, if you want to buy some books on the occult, political satire, and various other things, link in the description, cross-platform, and pinned at top on chat if you're watching on YouTube to my books blog. You can peruse that at your leisure. There's hundreds and hundreds of titles available, mostly edited works, but I've written a number. I'm currently writing, I think, 4 works at the same time, so in various stages of completion. Orange Man Big Part 2, by the way, that should be coming down the line, probably next month. I'll see what my schedule looks like. There's all sorts of good shit to talk about today, but starting off, we'll talk about Gal Luft. And I'm going to reiterate what I said this morning, mainly on this news story. Gal Luft, of course, U.S.-Israeli dual citizen, has been charged by the Justice Department, by Biden's DOJ, with not being being an unregistered foreign agent. The idea is that he worked with Chinese groups, and he did that without registering properly. Now, if you know anything about the act which requires registering as a foreign agent if you're working for a foreign, like a gubernatorial source, or like something in some foreign regime, is selectively applied. It's not often that a person is effectively acting as a foreign agent and has to register. They're technically supposed to, but you have differential enforcement. It is telling to me that Gal Luft came out with his tell-all, and a few days later is when they charge him, because they'd already been looking into him for extradition for some time. I mean, that part of the story is ages old at this point. Does anyone find it non-coincidental, the timing? Well, he once again reiterates to the world, hey, Joe Biden, I've got proof that Joe Biden worked with the Chinese. And by the way, that's literally what Gal Luft is now charged with. He was doing it illegally. And I tried to tell the FBI about it, and they wouldn't take up the case. They told me to fuck off. And then all of a sudden, they were angling for me to be extradited from Cyprus. What a coincidence that the DOJ happens to formally indict a few days after his latest iteration of his story. I don't think that it's a coincidence. I do, however, think that the charge is legit. Here's my premise. The fact that Gal Luft could be guilty of doing this, again, differential enforcement applies, does not negate the equal guilt of Biden or the fact that Gal Luft's allegation is wrong. Both can be true at the same time. And the problem is that both parties benefit from the situation that's as it's currently played out. Gal Luft realizes, hey, I'm under an extradition order. I can't hide forever, probably. I'm probably going to get hauled in. I'm going to put out my claim about Joe Biden now, cut the head off the snake. People will see it as political if I'm indeed indicted. Meanwhile, the Biden administration hopes that by indicting Gal Luft for something that he probably did do, I think that both parties are guilty of what they're blamed for, that also politicizes it. So half the population will say, well, Gal Luft's claim can't be true because Gal Luft is under indictment. Because in the minds of the public, we often fall into a football team mentality where if one person is guilty of something, anyone else who opposed them automatically is exonerated. So it's the same with TDS. Orange man bad. So if a person like George W. comes out and says, well, I fucking hate Trump, all of a sudden his sins are forgiven by half the population. The other half of the population, meanwhile, will hate his guts. Rightfully so in W's case, but there will be people who are fooled by that. I think that both of the claims are factual. I think that Gal Luft did operate as a foreign agent without registering because it happens all the time. It's a completely believable fucking claim. I think that the DOJ, though, only charged him to cover for Joe Biden. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had a problem with it. What happened is that they decided to come out and attack him to allow the legacy media to talk about the story and say, well, alleged whistleblower under indictment for espionage or whatever it would fall under broadly is the one claiming that Joe Biden committed a crime. Well, that's obviously not the case because he's been indicted by the Department of Justice. Oh, by the way, this bureau is completely independent and Biden has absolutely no say over what happens there. We're supposed to believe that. I think that both of them are true. I give a 100% chance that Biden is guilty of having foreign dealings that are illegal. We know that effectively based on Hunter Biden's laptop, especially. As far as Gal Luft, there's a good chance that he's also guilty of the charge, but the charge is typically not made. It's differential enforcement rules for thee, not for me. How many individuals within Congress technically should have to register as foreign agents? Probably half of them, but it never happens now, does it? Because nobody compels them to. People, by the way, break the law all the time without knowing it. It's about differential enforcement. So you got 10 people that smoked crack. You're aware of this fact, but one of them happens to be a dissident. They're the only one that you haul in. Happens all the time. Michael Banker. Sticks, who is your favorite left-leaning independent content creator? Who on the alternative media left do you think makes the arguments? I think that if someone is on the left, they can't make good arguments, at least from an economic viewpoint, generally speaking. And I don't, I would say one of the few that's palatable is Jimmy Dore, although he's not fully independent. I mean, he's got his own group. So he'd be missing link media. Yeah, Adam Berger has a good point. You find me the man, I'll find you the crime. We've all broken the law. I know that I have. I've possessed drugs before, etc. Disclaimer, that was a long time ago. Statute of limitations is exceeded on that. Well, for at least a half a decade on any of those things. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I smoked weed before it was legal in Vermont, and I did psychotropics and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, if I had been well known at the time before the statute of limitations was out, probably I could have been arrested. I could have been charged. Well, he's making trip report videos on YouTube back in like 2010 or something. We got to nail him because he's influencing people in the wrong way, especially if you attack members of the government. If you attack members of the government that literally runs all the law enforcement stuff, it can be dangerous for people. So I think that both are true. I do think that Gal Luft did act as an unregistered foreign agent, but that does not exonerate Biden. But that's what you're going to be told. Well, it's a conspiracy theory because Gal Luft is a criminal. That's the line that they're already going with. Krasenstein was going with that line earlier. Awesome Diesel on Rumble. This Sticks live stream is brought to you by Pfizer. And Czech Rumbler is now a monthly supporter over on Rumble. Thank you very much. Again, I have no clue how monthly supporter things work, actually. In 2020, I stole a sanitizer bottle from my school and destroyed it. Oh, yeah, I stole stuff from the chem lab at both UVM and my high school. I did that. I fully admit to it. Again, statute of limitations applies. You got nothing on me. Yeah, I stole quite a few chemicals in high school. Sorry, Mr. Navarrete. I think he's dead by now. Yeah, and did my own experiments with him. At least I had a scientific curiosity and wasn't fencing him or something. I figured, well, it's taxpayer-funded school. I can always get more, right? Awesome Diesel. Damn it, Ron reads whatever is on the teleprompter. Cat's warbling out there. It's another hot day. That's why I look a little bit maybe sweaty and a little bit red, actually, because I got plenty of sun. You can tell it doesn't affect every part of my body evenly. Got a little bit of a tan. Unfortunately, I don't tan very well. Some people, they get like bronze colored. It's like, okay, that's fine. Some of us, we just fucking burn. You know, it's just a thing. I blame my Anglo-Saxon ancestry. Next news story. Meta's Twitter rival Threads hits 100 million users in record 5 days. Oh my God. How wonderful for Zuckerberg. See, here's the problem, as I iterated before. Meta is bootstrapped onto Instagram. If an Instagram user signs up for Threads and is spending more time there than on Instagram, what has Zuckerberg just done? He's taken a person who's already regularly using one of his services and simply caused them to use a different service that he himself administers. There's no gain in actual engagement. There's no gain in anything. It's Meta is the parent company. It's part of a network. It's sort of like if Google had a new kind of blogging system. Well, I mean, it's competing with Blogspot. So if somebody says, well, this is great, deletes their Blogspot and then gets the new system, Google can claim it's got a new user, but it lost a user off an older service. It's like if Google were to create another video platform other than YouTube or something, and all of a sudden people start using it, okay. But in some cases, they've gone off of YouTube. They were already using your service. That's number one. Number two, I have a feeling that a lot of these accounts are bots. Zuckerberg has been known to inflate numbers artificially before. He did this with Facebook. What you do, TikTok has done this too. You create a company and you artificially inflate engagement and the user base in order to attract people to the platform. Then you throttle back once it becomes more organic growth. TikTok did this. In the first wave of TikTok, a significant proportion of people on that platform were not real. They were bots. I can attest to this from things that I've heard from several people that contacted me that helped to work on developing TikTok. It was heavily botted. It might have been mostly bots. It was at least a significant number of people on the platform that were not real people. The idea is that then when the platform gets big, people are coming in because they say, wow, it's growing so fast, it's so exciting. Then they get on, they create real content, and then the bots slowly filter back out. So you've built an organic platform. It's underhanded. It's clearly a political attack as well. Zuckerberg, who loves censorship, is trying to undercut Twitter. Twitter is less censored at this point. It's not perfect. There are still some gremlins in the machine. There are some fucking monkey shines going on with community notes, especially being manipulated, but it has improved. It is better than before. Meanwhile, I keep hearing that Twitter is collapsing. That's funny. I would assume if the platform is quickly being debilitated, I should see a drop-off in engagement on the platform. At the very least, I should be losing followers on there, but I'm not. Instead, I'm still growing at about the same rate. So I call bullshit on this particular story. And the legacy media is attempting to astroturf the concept of Meta as the new hip place to be for all the beautiful people because they don't like Twitter. What they don't want is competition in a free marketplace of ideas. Twitter, while not a free marketplace of ideas, is closer to it than Meta will ever be. When a platform, by the way, starts off with heavy-handed censorship, it can go nowhere but down. And this is what we see from Zuckerberg's latest project. I suspect that Threads will continue to be artificially inflated and astroturfed. I do not expect it to supplant Twitter, though. I expect it to eventually become a zombie site. You will note there was once such a thing as Google+, that at peak had about 200 million users. But that's because it was forced on people. Right now, Instagram is almost forcing its users to use Threads in order to have an Instagram account at all. No shit, you've got 100 million users. A portion of the Instagram user base has decided to open a Threads account. That doesn't mean that they're using it. Tell me about the engagement numbers next. But by the way, I've heard that Twitter is collapsing like 3 or 4 times over the last year anyway. Oh my God, they're done for this time. Elon Musk has done something terrible. And then, of course, Twitter doesn't go anywhere. Mario47933. Morning, Sticks. Hear about Ron Perlman leaving Twitter? Big sad. Yes, I think, has he deleted his account or has he just decided to go dormant and use Threads? Ron Perlman, yo, little Donnie. Yo, little Donnie, I took a shit all over myself. How's them apples? Hunter Wadley, any thoughts on the supervolcano in Yellowstone erupting? What would the United States look like afterwards? What would that look like in 2023? It would debilitate the entire world's climate for a number of years. You'd get your climactic cooling and all the crops would fail. and probably kill off half the world's population, as well as 100% of the people within, let's say, 300 or 400 miles of the Yellowstone Basin. Thankfully, most of that area is not particularly populated, but it would kill a lot of people. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, though. Sebastian Monroe. Sticks, you're turning red like an engine. Well, I'm part Abenaki, so I'm allowed. The Patriot Cairo, the Hong Kong pandemic was an intelligence test. Yeah, a de facto intelligence test, you could call it that. Let's see. Now we've got Turkey. By the way, I may keep it short today because, of course, I'm more tired. I mean, I'm not even cooking dinner, and I like cooking. We're ordering out. We're getting sushi tonight. Turkey agrees to back Sweden's NATO bid, Secretary General says. Now, they already did this for Finland. They're in NATO now. Sweden was the big holdout, and Turkey was holding it over the head of NATO for one reason, and we do have mixed reporting on the importance of this. They want into the European Union. They want to be part of the European sphere because a small chunk of Turkey is in Europe geographically. They've wanted to be in the EU for a long time, and others have held out on having them do that. As far as my opinion, adding Sweden to NATO is fine. I don't consider a nation joining an alliance to be a direct confrontation with any other entity. And Sweden is not known to be the most warmongering nation in the world. I just don't know how important it is that Sweden joins NATO. If two NATO countries completely surround it already, and Russia would need an aquatic landing to do anything there, that would be difficult, number one. Number two, can you please tell me what nation in the world would be afraid of Sweden rattling swords at them? The Maldives could probably beat them in a fight. Sweden has great MREs. They spent all their military budget, I guess, on making mushroom soup powder, and none of it on actual training or anything. Sweden has systemic issues right now with massive spiraling crime rates and terrorism. It's not heavily populated. It's economically very wealthy. It has a lot of industrial materials, their fuel and so forth. They've got a lot of minerals to mine out of the earth, et cetera, et cetera. But, because of their particular economic system, it's not really fully capitalized upon. I don't have a problem with NATO expansion, but I mean, I would think you'd want to add a nation that is either under threat, number one, and NATO apparently no longer means North Atlantic anyway, so it's gone beyond that at this point. Or a nation that had more firepower, so a nation that can actually help you in a military sense. Nonetheless, it's not problematic to me. NATO is making plenty of mistakes. That doesn't mean that it having another nation in it makes the situation fundamentally different. With Turkey in the EU, what I've said for years is that Europe is already destabilizing, at least in that post-national level. We see this with Brexit. We've seen it with protests in France, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, and other places, especially Western Europe. There is a lot of animus towards the kind of political discourse that happens in Turkey already in Europe, especially among Germans, I would point out. A lot of Turks have gone to Germany to study, to live, and so forth. If Turkey joins the EU, it will embolden groups within the EU that have nationalist ties as well as left-leaning ones. It will continue that same sort of spiral that I've talked about before for years now, that the US managed to avoid, at least in part, but Europe is still going headlong into, which is the inability of the old establishment to address new issues. So the old entrenched establishment of the end era Cold War no longer has political relevance in Europe, yet they're still mainly the ones that are in power. A bunch of old people, the old guard, and their trainees that are younger. They have the same ideas, but the ideas don't work in today's socio-political and economic climate. They're not, the socio-political climate's different. The economic climate is different. We've got globalism now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think that if Turkey does back Sweden's bid for NATO, probably Europe allows Turkey into the EU. There will definitely be some holdout countries, though. I wonder what Hungary would have to say about that, or Romania, by the way, for that matter. We'll see what happens with the European Union. They lose Britain and they gain Turkey. They made a trade, I suppose. We'll see. Let's see. I think there was another super chat there that I didn't get to. I don't want to miss any because sometimes I do and people get upset at that. By the way, there are more people watching right now on Rumble than are on YouTube by a considerable margin. This no longer surprises me. YouTube's probably, most of my subscribers didn't get a notification, so unless they follow me elsewhere, they don't know that I'm live right now. Whereas on Rumble, people are aware of that fact. They're aware that it's the case. Speaking of Super Chats and Rumble, Swamp Donkey has showed up. Turkey and EU means they will let loose 2 or 3 million immigrants. We're reading there was something like 4 million immigrants in Turkey ready to go to Europe. Yeah, I mean, that's possible. Well, Western Europeans will pour into Turkey too, actually, because imagine living the expat lifestyle. You're making 100K euros a year or something, and you're living in what would be considered a reasonable part of the Aegean side of Turkey, where the cost of living is half as much at most, for much more. There will be people who do that. Already happens. People, apparently, one problem that people in Europe have with the Dutch sometimes is the Dutch get rich doing banking or something, and then they go and they buy like a mansion in Hungary or a castle in France, and the French have a problem with that, I guess, more than anyone else. Fucking Dutch people buying up all our castles. Jesus fucking Christ. Czech Rumbler, send $100, by the way. Thank you on Rumble. Hi, Sticks. Hello from the Czech Republic, the land of gunsmiths, breweries, and porn stars. Just wanted to share my first earnings from my side hustle I've started, detailing cars. Stay safe, Clank. Well, thank you very much. Good luck on car detailing. If I'm ever in the Czech Republic, maybe I'll roll on through. The Landlord Harassment Channel. Will Turkey go to war with roast beef? Turkey, it's a bird. J. Binaro. Hey, Sticks, enjoy the sushi tonight. Yes, I will. Eel sushi especially. That is my favorite. The fourth link, and this is in the description, actually. You should check this out. There's been massive flooding in the northeastern part of the United States, centered on a narrow strip of land right in the middle of Vermont, of which Rutland is just part of. And I talked to my mom about this, and apparently the road, Ludlow is a mess. I guess they're the new Brandon. Brandon got hit hard by Irene. This time it was Ludlow's turn. Ludlow looks like a wasteland at the moment. It's going to take tens of millions of dollars and weeks to clean this shit up. And they weren't even the worst hit, by the way. This is just the center, the eye of the storm location. So that route that goes south-southeast from Rutland is cut off. The pass over Killington has also been cut off. You can't get to Bridgewater at the moment. There's been heavy damage to roads up north. Rutland is almost cut off from the outside world on 3 sides at the moment. And the damage actually spread into upstate New York. Here's the problem. When you talk about getting a couple of inches of rain in a flat state like Florida, people brush it off because the water, builds up, but it doesn't really, there's no rivers per se, ponds and lakes and shit. You don't have rivers in the same sense. When you have mountains, though, it becomes different. Because if 99% of your state is mountain, and most people tend to be concentrated in the areas between mountains, all that water comes funneled down and concentrates and concentrates. So an inch of rain all of a sudden becomes a torrent. In some areas, they got 4 inches of rain. So we're talking close to Irene levels. There is more expected, unfortunately. So the damage is not done being done yet. And if they don't shore things up in some of these areas, that damage will multiply vastly if they get hit by another humdinger of a storm. So Ludlow's fucked. At least at the moment. There's been at least 1 death in Vermont, by the way. Damage in upstate New York. And there's a fly trying to mate on the webcam for some reason. And I just figure that people should see this. It's drone footage of Ludlow. And just take a look at this aerial view of this. Well, it's not a city. It's a small town. It's fucked. Literally fucked. And that's right in the downtown, by the way. That's the center of Ludlow that got hit because the river decided to overflow its banks. The Brothers Crin. Mind giving us a shout out? I do Tolkien and Conan stuff. Also, Sticks terrified before move to France. I'm scared of moving. Any words of encouragement? Just relax, I don't know where you're from. You're moving to France? Are you from the United States? I'm assuming by your flag you're Canadian. Anyway, you've got your shout out there. Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much. If you speak French, you'll be well received. They won't have a problem with you. Sebastian Monroe, upstate New York is flooded. Rip in peace, steamed hams. Yeah, I saw the damage was severe all over the place up there. King of Biltong, good morning from Antons in Roanoke, Texas. Hashtag Clank Nation. Our daily clank from the Roanoke Texans who make yummy meat. And I get into theirs. Yeah, the flies are literally spinning around over here, buzzing around and trying to fuck each other. Or maybe they're having a fly fight. That's possible. I don't know if flies get territorial at all. I don't think they do. Don't really have the means to attack each other. Look at this little bastard. Maybe I can ping you out. Oh, you got to be really slow and careful. Oh, I actually got him. I don't know if I killed it, but I definitely got it. Yeah, I think I injured the fly. Haha, animal abuse live on camera. And get a strike from YouTube for ping-yowing a fly. Next news story. A stronger NATO for a more dangerous world. What the alliance must do in Vilnius and beyond. I would like to talk about this specifically because of something that is unrelated to this actual article. It's actually about Ukraine entering NATO. Unlike Sweden, that's not currently at war, NATO cannot accept Ukraine because under its articles, if a nation is at war, you can't get into NATO. Right now, Ukraine is at war with Russia. Doesn't matter what form that war takes. Even if they push the Russians out of Ukraine, as long as fighting continues, technically speaking, they can never join. Russia could effectively right now withdraw from Ukraine, tell them fuck you, and just perpetually be in a state of war, and Ukraine would legally never be able to join. And this was pointed out by none other the other day than Biden. Even Biden has ruled out the possibility. And you know that Biden wants to expand NATO, because the more you expand something like that, the more prolapsed and protracted it becomes, the more unstable it tends to get. Another reason why the EU has difficulties. When you cobble together disparate parts, disparate nations into an alliance, into a currency union, into military strategy together and so forth, there are more and more disagreements. And so you need more and more centrality. And that reduces and reduces efficiency. In this end, it's like a snake eating its own tail. And not in the cool way, like my Ouroboros logo. Ukraine should not be able to join NATO until such day as the war ends. If you had admitted them years and years ago, in the dead of night perhaps, then there wouldn't have been a war. But this was overlooked by multiple administrations, including the Trump administration, by the way. He didn't prioritize it. Nonetheless, I would point out that at least under his administration, Ukraine was not invaded. It was under Obama. It has been under Joe Biden. There's a reason for that, and it ain't because Trump is under Putin's thumb. Not the way that politics works in the United States. They're hoping you don't understand that. So Ukraine will not be joining NATO probably anytime soon. Ken, I'm a gay man, have zero interest in voting for DeSantis after that cringe ad. He lost my vote for life. Trump is my choice or Vivek. Vivek Ramaswamy has some good points to him. I would point out if it weren't Trump right now, like if he weren't nominee and it weren't someone really good like Rand Paul, I would probably just write Trump in. I mean, I'm not going to vote for Asa Hutchinson. I'm not going to vote for Mike Pence. I'm not going to vote for Chris Christie. At this point, I wouldn't vote for DeSantis. Who am I supposed to vote for if it isn't Donald Trump? And Ramaswamy, unfortunately, is non-viable. He's too far down the pack. Of the other two people with technical viability, it's between Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis. No, thank you. Not going to happen. As a non-Republican, I don't have a problem with simply sitting it out if it's not Donald Trump. So they should be well aware of that. Next news story, the left-wing white men who own Ben & Jerry's will never return any land to Native Americans. I agree with that assessment. Yeah, Ben & Jerry's came out. We talked about this last week with a dumb tweet talking about how we needed to return stolen native lands to, the Indians, basically. And which is stupid. It wasn't stolen in the first place, and much of it was unoccupied. Much of it only occupied in a migratory sense. Many of those cultures didn't have the concept of land being able to be owned at all. And in other cases, it was purchased for various gifts. Let us settle here. We claim this island, and here's a bag of bees. May not be a fair trade, but it was a binding trade. The land was not stolen from the tribes that were stealing it from one another for thousands of years anyway. So there's that. Ben & Jerry's, though, then was challenged to give its own personal land in the state of Vermont, ironically enough, back to the Abenaki, because the Abenaki tribe occupied the whole area. And unlike many tribes, they actually did have a semi-sedentary lifestyle, so they did actually have the concept of meaningful civilization in the sense of building something other than the net you go fishing with and then carry to the next fishing spot, or the spear that you just chiseled up and you were following a herd of mammoths or something like that. People in parts of the northeastern tribes did have a more sedentary lifestyle. They also warred frequently with their fellow native tribes. So it seems to have backfired. Anyway, the people at Ben & Jerry's, you think that they would give their factory to the Abenaki Confederation? The Abenaki people making ice cream would be very funny. I guess it's a step up from owning a casino, like some of the southwestern tribes do. So there's that. At least, instead of robbing people's money because they're a monkey that sits there playing with a slot machine like they're completely nuts and they lose their money that way, they can lose their money by getting diabetes eating overpriced ice cream. Yeah, Eugene Reed. Ben & Jerry's will come out with an Indian-named ice cream flavor to honor the tribe. Yeah, Abenaki Apple or something like that. Abenaki Apple Swirl. Native Nougat. John Diamond. Good morning, Sticks. When are you moving back to the U.S.? Any chance of holding a Clanker rally or meetup in the future? I don't know when I'll be back in the United States. At the point that I've become a dual citizen, I can just go back and forth whenever the hell I want. So, yeah, tomahawk tomato ice cream. That would be something. They'd probably do it too. 10% of all proceeds from Abenaki Apple Swirl will go to the Abenaki Confederation's native school for blind children or something like that. And that'll be feel-good NIMBYism as usual. Swamp Donkey. Ben & Jerry's needs to be returned to the factory. It is disgusting sugar paste. All hail Bluebell ice cream, the one true ice cream. I don't eat any ice cream. It's all sugary slop. If I want something that's sweet and, icy or something like that, I'll just freeze fruit. Smush some berries together, freeze it in a cup, and then chisel it off and eat it it's sort of like an Italian ice, only without any artificial sugar. That's what I like. Especially if it melts and then refreezes, so it gets syrupy. That's when it's good. That happened with our raspberries once that we picked when I was in Rutland once. Oh, it was so good. It was better than any ice cream, let me tell you. And then we have a final news story here. It's specifically, who was it? It wasn't Jerome Powell. It was Dalio, Ray Dalio, who has warned now that the United States might have a 1930s style economic disorder. They call it in this article. What you mean is a depression, especially if the Fed continues to hike interest rates. Now, I parse it apart from the importance of the Fed having to get involved for the economy to be on tippy toes right now, because Bidenomics has failed. I have a feeling that the use of the term Bidenomics by the Biden regime is going to be the thing that cements his loss in the 2024 election, because the warning signs are still there for the U.S. economy, but they're making a pretense as though they're not. Of course, that could force Biden to stand down in the scenario that in the next 6 months, especially, Bidenomics collapses under its own weight and we end up with a spiraling out of control situation. Look for Biden to face massive pressure to stand down so that he's not dead weight in the campaign. I don't think that the maneuver would work, though, because, I can't see anyone else in the Dem field who would run instead. I guess you're down to Whitmer and Gavin Newsom. Gavin clearly has ambitions. I would be very surprised if he doesn't run in 2028, but we're not sure. He toys with the idea, but it could be one of those ideas that he decides to forfeit. Well, I'm already the popular governor, and I've already got a national platform. Yeah, I could run for the presidency, but I'm already controlling one of the largest economies in the world just by being a fucking governor. So why do I, unless you want to go Beto mode, Beto O'Rourke, you'll remember, had a position actually in the legislature down in Texas. He gave that up. He gave up his House seat in order to run for a series of other things, none of which he's actually amounted to anything in. It was funny. The closest he came was knocking off Ted Cruz when the Republicans were in their darkest hour, and he couldn't even accomplish that. And Ted Cruz is not the most charismatic and well-liked person in the Senate. Now, let's see. Opinionated Junkie went to a gun range. Bullets pricier than gun rental. Interesting. 22s, I think, are still fairly cheap. But yeah, ammo prices are through the roof. So other than the smaller, more common rounds, you're going to be paying a pretty penny. I think that I'm going to go offline, actually. I know that it's only been about 35 minutes, but I've run out of news stories already. I'm just feeling de-energized, and really, it's too fucking hot. I want to splash water all over myself, possibly with the garden hose, and then eat sushi later. Unfortunately, they're not open yet, so I'll have to wait for my eel. We do have one more. Oops, Origami. King of Biltong, your persistence has worked. My wife has mandated a trip to Anton's when we're in Dallas in a couple of weeks. Go get you some. Yeah, Biltong is good. I've had it before. Anton's Biltong is probably amazing, so I'll be getting that someday as well. Got to get back down to Texas at some point. Texas is pretty cool. go see some cactuses. First time I ever saw a cactus in the wild, we were just outside of Dallas, ironically enough, on the highway. There's one in the middle of the road in the median. I'm like, what? At first I thought I was hallucinating from lack of sleep. And then I'm like, oh, that's right. I'm, literally halfway across the continent right now. It was pretty lit. Let me tell you, it was a good time. That's about all.